The drive back home was supposed to be a simple, uneventful ride. The 4th of July cookout at Isabel's house in Alabama had been a perfect way to end the evening. Good friends, laughter, and the crackle of fireworks lighting up the night sky. I'd spent the evening surrounded by kids waving sparklers, and the low hum of conversation filled the warm night air. I hadn't planned on staying late, but I didn't leave until just after 10 p.m. Looking back now, I can't help but think that was my first mistake. The road home stretched ahead of me, 2 long hours through the dark rural stretches of Alabama. It's a quiet part of the state, one that feels like it's stuck in time. The roads were deserted, with only the occasional farmhouse or tiny church appearing like dark silhouettes against the deep night sky. The trees on either side of the road towered over me, their thick branches forming an almost suffocating canopy. I could feel the silence closing in, almost like the world around me had stopped breathing. I was in a good mood, still riding the high from the cookout, music playing softly in the background. But there was something unsettling about driving down these roads at night. It wasn't fear, not exactly. More like a creeping unease. I've always been a little scared of the dark. Something about being alone, miles from the nearest town, just gets to me. Silly, I know. But there's always that feeling of something lurking just beyond the reach of the headlights, waiting for the right moment to strike. About 30 minutes into the drive, I noticed headlights in my rearview mirror. At first, I didn't think much of it. Someone else must be on the same road. But then, as the minutes ticked by, I realized the car behind me wasn't moving like it should. It was a gray Nissan Altima, nothing special about it at first glance. But there was something off. Its bottom half was splattered with mud, caked on in uneven patches. I could see it every time we passed one of those occasional streetlights. Still, I shrugged it off. The world's full of strange things, and this didn't feel like a threat. Not yet. That is, until I noticed that no matter how much I sped up or slowed down, the Nissan stayed locked in behind me. My pulse quickened, but I told myself it was nothing. Just a coincidence, right? I pressed the gas, picking up speed, my eyes flicking nervously to the mirror. The Nissan matched my pace. I dropped my foot off the gas and tapped the brakes, letting myself drift below the speed limit. The Nissan did the same, staying exactly 6 or 7 car lengths behind me. That's when the knot of anxiety in my stomach tightened. I wasn't sure what was going on, but it was starting to feel wrong. Every now and then, on roads like this, someone would pass me, but this car wasn't passing. It wasn't trying to get ahead. It was just following. Then, as if driven by some primal instinct, I decided to test them. There was a random left turn coming up, just a narrow road with a handful of homes scattered along it. Nothing that would suggest someone would be out here at this hour. I made the turn sharply, wanting to put as much distance between myself and that car as possible. But as I glanced into the mirror, I saw the headlights follow suit. The Nissan made the exact same turn behind me, slipping into the darkness of the back road with no hesitation. I didn't need to think about it anymore. This wasn't a coincidence. I was being followed. The sick feeling in my gut twisted deeper. I felt like a small animal being stalked by something much larger, and that primal fear took over. My breath hitched, and my hands gripped the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. The silence inside the car was deafening now, even though I could hear the hum of the tires against the road. It felt like I was moving through a fog, and everything, every sound, every vibration, seemed amplified. My heart thudded in my chest, painfully loud. I had to get away. I had to find a place where people could see me, somewhere with lights, somewhere public. But that's when the car's gas light flicked on, the dreaded chime that signaled I was running out of fuel. My stomach dropped. I could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on me. My car was old, 2012 Corolla, barely hanging together. The gas needle was already on empty, and I didn't know how much further I could push it. The nearest gas station was 8 miles away, and I had no idea if I could make it that far with the car trailing me. I tried to stay calm, but the rising panic didn't help. The car behind me didn't let up. It didn't matter how fast I went or how slow. It stayed there, locked onto me like a predator waiting for the perfect moment to pounce. I thought about calling the police, but I knew it would be a waste of time. Out here in the middle of nowhere, a cop would take hours to arrive, and part of me feared that making the call would make the danger feel more real. That irrational voice kept telling me to just keep going, to ignore the dread and the fear. But I couldn't ignore the fear gnawing at me as the fuel gauge dropped lower and lower. The road stretched on forever, the distance between the Nissan and me never changing. I knew I wouldn't make it to the gas station. It felt like the world was pressing in, suffocating me in the silence. Every sound, the rumble of the engine, the rush of wind, seemed louder now, as though they were mocking me, reminding me how powerless I was. Then by some miracle I saw it. The faint glow of a gas station sign up ahead. My heart skipped. I took the turn hard, pulling into the parking lot, barely giving myself time to stop the car before I jumped out and ran for the door. I slammed the door behind me, barely hearing it close over the pounding of my heartbeat. I ran inside the station, not daring to look back until I was safely in. Through the window I could see the Nissan Altima. It stopped at the edge of the lot, engine idling. I held my breath, watching as the car stayed there for a long, tense moment. Then, without warning, it sped off, disappearing down the road we'd just come from. The gas station clerk offered to call the police, but even after speaking with them, I still felt the weight of dread pressing on me. Something wasn't right. It didn't feel like just a random encounter. The car, the timing, the way it followed me, it all screamed something darker. I left the gas station with my hands still shaking, feeling the sting of adrenaline in my veins. A few weeks later, I sat at home, the news on in the background, when a report about 2 men suspected of armed robbery and attempted murder flashed across the screen. They had been last seen driving a stolen gray Nissan Altima headed east. My blood ran cold. I didn't have proof, but I knew deep down that it had been them. The timing matched. The location lined up. The description of the car was nearly identical. I called the police and told them everything I knew, but it was too late. I couldn't help but think that my hesitation to call the cops sooner might have allowed these men to escape. It was a warm, humid July 4th weekend, and I found myself making the drive down to the Jersey Shore with my longtime friend, Jimmy. We've been friends for over 20 years, so when he invited me to this massive event he was hosting, I couldn't turn it down. Jimmy had built quite a reputation within the East Coast dance and electronic music scene. He and his team had been putting on huge events at high-profile venues, bringing in famous DJs from all over. I wasn't really a part of that scene, but the perks were undeniable. VIP access, free drinks, and the chance to meet some of the most well-known figures in the industry. As we drove down with our other friend, Ryan, I could feel the excitement building. We arrived hours before the event started, and while Jimmy and his crew got to work setting up, Ryan and I decided to get a head start on the night's festivities. The venue was buzzing with anticipation, and the free drinks offered by the staff seemed like an invitation to indulge. By the time the first DJ took the stage, Ryan and I were well on our way to being completely wasted. It was 4th of July weekend after all, and we felt like we were entitled to go a little overboard. The music pounded in my ears, the flashing lights making everything feel a bit surreal. I could feel the alcohol making my body lighter, my movements more carefree. It was the kind of buzz that made you forget the world around you and lose yourself in the moment. But as the night wore on, I could feel myself slipping further and further into that haze. The good times were beginning to blur and my judgment was fading. The event was winding down, and it was at that point when the real trouble began. Ryan and I, both well past tipsy, decided to take a stroll over to the bar. We met 2 girls, Gianna and Marcella, who seemed to be just as intoxicated as we were. The conversation flowed easily at first, and before long, we were making plans to leave the club together and continue the party elsewhere. I wasn't sure what the plan was, but the prospect of leaving with 2 beautiful, confident women had us both feeling even more confident in our drunken state. Marcella suggested we head back to her beach house. I was surprised at first. Normally the guys are the ones who host, but Marcella insisted her beach house was nicer than our Airbnb, so I didn't argue. Ryan didn't either. The 4 of us headed toward the exit, drinks in hand. Outside, the warm night air hit me, the salty scent of the ocean mixing with the lingering alcohol. We started walking along the beach, the sound of waves crashing softly in the distance. The conversation flowed easily, but the alcohol made it hard to focus on the words. I felt off. Not just drunk, but different. I felt heavier, like the weight of my own body was too much to bear. Every step felt like it took more effort than it should have. I could feel my limbs growing stiff like I was walking through quicksand. My legs felt numb and my thoughts became hazy. I tried to shake off the discomfort, but it only seemed to intensify. There was a moment when I wondered if I had maybe drunk too much, but the thought passed quickly as we reached Marcella's house. The house was huge, nothing like I'd ever seen before. It looked like something out of a magazine, sleek and modern, yet with an air of quiet luxury. The interior was clean, almost minimalist, but every piece of furniture and art seemed meticulously placed, like it was all part of some bigger design. Ryan and Marcella disappeared into the house almost immediately, and I was left alone with Gianna. She moved closer to me, her lips parting as she leaned in to kiss me. That's when everything went black. I don't remember what happened after that. The next thing I knew, I was waking up in an unfamiliar place, my head pounding like someone was hammering on my skull. The sunlight burned through the trees and I could barely make out my surroundings. I was lying in a patch of bushes far from the beach house, a good hour away from the event. My heart raced as I struggled to sit up, but my limbs felt heavy, sluggish. My mind felt like it had been wiped clean, like I was waking up from anesthesia, disoriented and confused. I reached into my pockets hoping to find my phone or wallet, but nothing. There was nothing in my pockets at all. My shoes were soaked, the laces removed, and everything felt wrong. Panic set in. I had no idea how I ended up here or what had happened to me the night before. My thoughts raced, but I couldn't piece anything together. I wasn't just hungover, I was terrified. What if I had been in a fight? What if I had been in a car crash? The questions filled my head, but no answers came. I stood up and looked around. All I could see was trees and a distant 7-Eleven across the street. I didn't know where I was, but it seemed like my only option was to head for the store. Maybe someone there could help me. My stomach churned and I felt a chill run down my spine as I made my way over. Inside, the clerk looked at me warily as I asked to use the phone, claiming my phone had been stolen. After a few seconds of hesitation, he slid it across the counter. I dialed my sister's number. She was the only person I could think of. She answered quickly, her voice filled with concern. I tried to explain the best I could, but words felt foreign coming out of my mouth. She gave me Ryan's number and I called him several times, but he didn't answer. What was going on? What happened to us? And then, as if the universe was playing a cruel joke on me, Ryan walked into the same 7-Eleven. I couldn't believe it. We just stared at each other for a second before walking up to each other. He looked as disoriented as I felt. He told me his side of the story and it was nearly identical to mine. We both had been drugged. We both had lost our phones and wallets. We had no memory of the last several hours. The only thing that made sense was that we had been targeted, but why? Wasp. And why were we left in some random town wearing clothes that weren't ours? The police arrived soon after, but they didn't seem to take us seriously. They questioned us, trying to dismiss everything we said as drunken behavior. They suggested we'd wandered off and passed out somewhere, but I knew better. We weren't that drunk. Something else had happened, something far darker than anyone was willing to admit. After the police left, I checked my phone, and that's when it got even weirder. There were messages sent from me to people I knew, Jimmy, my parents' coworkers, even some girls I had been talking to. They sounded normal, like something I might say, but none of them made sense. They contradicted each other. I realized something had gone terribly wrong, but the answers I needed weren't coming. Ryan and I drove back to the shore, retracing our steps, trying to find the house. We found it eventually, but when we knocked, an older man answered. He had no idea who Marcella was, and that made my stomach churn with unease. There was something deeply unsettling about the whole situation, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something much darker had been at play. I'll never have the answers, and that thought haunts me. I can't help but wonder if Marcella and Gianna were part of something much bigger. Maybe they had planned something far more sinister, but for whatever reason they didn't go through with it. The darkness is always watching. If you want more stories that send chills down your spine, like, share and subscribe to Dark Echoes. Stay safe or don't. We'll see you next time.